US, Canada, Europe, the whole Western world is shooting itself in the foot pandering to ideologies that seem on the surface motivated by compassion or care for the planet, but underneath all the virtue signaling nonsense lies a much more disturbing truth. The greatest wealth transfer in the history of the world is happening while they try to distract us with seemingly innocuous things. You will own nothing and you will be happy. You will stop killing the planet by not heating your house or using your car. Those are just a few examples. Let's dive into how the Western world is moving into a new form of feudalism, and let's explore why it's happening. Canada is one step away from becoming a dystopian nightmare. Once a country regarded by most as one of the best places to live, fast forward to now, and its incessant push of woke ideology, it's at the forefront of all Western countries. Canada has depenalized the possession of hard drugs such as fentanyl, cocaine, or heroin. Life expectancy in some places of Canada for young people, it's dropping radically due to drug overdoses. They are suffering one of the world's epidemics in homelessness and drug use. Some streets in Vancouver are filled with drug users and homeless people, although the government seems more inclined to push the radical trans agenda on minors rather than tackling the real problems of its country.
So we're here on Vancouver's downtown east side, where the situation, whether it's open drug use or violent crime, just continues to get worse. And every day,
possession of hard drugs, including heroin, cocaine and fentanyl, has been legalized in the city.
What's going on in Vancouver then?
we've seen the street order explode. We've seen open drug use explode. Overdose deaths are up more than 1,000% in the past 10 years. Here in British Columbia, the province where Vancouver is, we saw more than 2,000 British Columbians die last year from overdoses alone. Every day in Vancouver, 4 people are randomly attacked.
Who is to blame for this chaos in Vancouver?
Well, what I was told when I was making the documentary by one small business owner is you get what you tolerate. Would you like to add something? Why is that? Making a documentary?
Yeah. But the thing is, how can you talk when you haven't seen one day of struggle in your whole life? You haven't gone through one day of struggle in your life.
Yeah, let's walk up and down these.
Just because you want to make some money.
Yeah.
I'm not making money off this. I'm not even, this isn't even my documentary.
You're looking down.
Thanks. Whenever somebody suggests, for example, that handing out more hard drugs or destigmatizing drugs like fentanyl and crystal meth might actually be making the problem worse, I don't think that's a radical position to take. It was pretty much a consensus up until 5 minutes ago, and now when you put a documentary out about it, you put a lot of people up against the wall, and I think that's what we saw. There's nowhere in the world, as far as I know, that has engaged in this level of permissiveness when it comes to these dangerous addictive substances like fentanyl and crystal meth. And I think there is the root of the problem. If you could snap your fingers and get rid of these drugs tomorrow, you would solve 80% of these problems.
Housing affordability for young people is a dream that will never come true. The price of a house in major cities of Canada is a luxury now only available to the wealthy. You own nothing and you will be happy. In the UK, they have passed a law that authorizes government to use reasonable force to install smart meters in UK households. That means that the government can use force to come into your house and make you install a smart meter that they can turn on or off as they please if they feel your consumption of energy is killing the planet. Does that ring a bell? You're killing the planet, so stop heating your house or using your car. In the UK, they have expanded the zone of ULEZ, which is a car ultra-low emission zone, a zone where old cars are required to pay £12.50 if they enter it. Before, only reserved for the most centric parts of London, now has been expanded to the whole of London. Nearly 700,000 cars will be affected by this expansion, being required to either pay the £12.50 a day or acquire a new car that's ULEZ compliant.
And what's your thoughts on ULEZ being expanded?
I think it's totally wrong. £12.50 a day isn't going to change anything. It's not people who can afford cars or vehicles or whatever. It's people that are struggling, and it's just going to make people struggle even worse. And little businesses around here and that, well, we all know that people just can't afford it. and it's always the people at the bottom that are going to struggle. So,
What's your message to the mayor?
I can't say it on camera.
You can.
He's an absolute sod. I hate him. We need to get him out. That's it.
Gary, what's your thoughts on ULEZ being expanded?
I think it's disgusting. It really is. Like they're talking about pollution, like in this area, when I've had planes flying over my head for 57 years. it's just a total joke. And like I say, most of the vehicles that they're saying, because it's coming up on the telly, all cars over 16 years old, it's rubbish. It's about the emissions that come out of the car, not the age of the vehicle. But like I say, like my mate's mum, she's got to get rid of her car, £2,000 scrappage scheme. What is she going to buy with £2,000? You can't buy a car that's compliable with the £2,000, so it's going to put people in debt. I've got an old boy who lives up the road from me, he's getting a new car, but he's not ready. He can't go shopping now.
This works van ULEZ compliant, but you've got a car that isn't ULEZ compliant.
I have to drive to work. Like I said, if I was to drive to work in my car, it takes me 30 minutes. If I was to use public transport, 2 hours, 37 minutes. Which one would you do?
But then you've got to pay that £12.50.
Yeah. Or I can cycle, it'll take me about half a day to work.
There is a new type of people here in the UK, a person who is working full time, but his salary barely allows him to pay his rent, his food and his bills. They are calling them the working poor. Homelessness is rising due to the cost of living crisis, and there are families with children stuck in hotels as temporary accommodations. They can't afford the absurd prices of housing in London. People sleeping in tents in friends and family's gardens due to the high cost of rent in London.
But there's a housing crisis here too, and the risks no less real. Ian and Teresa are living in a tent in a family member's garden. The family of four were given a no-fault eviction in June, but because they both work, they don't qualify for emergency accommodation, which would cost them £160 per night. The tent is their only option.
Renting, the costs are ridiculous, and then you've got people that are offering 6 months rent in advance, so they're going to have them rather than us. It's very competitive, which it wasn't a few years ago.
Obviously not getting much sleep in the tent and then go and work doing a 12-hour shift. I'm like constantly tired, but it's just what I've got to do, isn't it?
It's took its toll on me mentally. Like really, but like I said, I've been suicidal, so and I've rang the hotlines a few times to just chat to people and stuff. So
Ben has been told the same. A father of three, he works full-time as a locksmith, but was served an eviction notice in April and also placed in a hotel by Enfield Council. Almost 5 months on, they're still here.
There you go.
With no cooking facilities, no fridge, and despite earning a full-time wage, nowhere they can afford.
We can't rent anywhere. You have to earn over £50,000, or you have to have a guarantor who earns over £50,000. They work it out at 30 times the monthly rent, so if you're not earning that, then you can't rent it.
How does that make you feel?
Frustrated, because no matter how hard I work, I know I'm not going to be able to earn that. So if I was to move, I wouldn't be able to work, I wouldn't be able to provide for my family.
In the US, places like California, when homeless people roam the streets everywhere you look. In San Francisco, owners of cars are leaving their trunks and windows open to avoid people breaking into their cars.
Rampant crime is another public health and safety issue. Some blame policies like Proposition 47, which considers theft under $1,000 a misdemeanor and made cars a prime target throughout the city. Addiction, crime, and homelessness have overtaken much of San Francisco. At one time, a city considered an American destination. Despite a judge's order protecting encampments, a number of the Bay Area's tent cities have been torn down to reduce crime and clear streets. Now those people live in sidewalk dwellings or business and residential doorways.
Yeah, you know, San Francisco is in a total free-for-all, you know, and what's strange about this gig, and this is self-inflicted, they survived the 1906 fire and earthquake, the 1989 earthquake, the AIDS epidemic, but those were natural plagues and occurrences. They did this to themselves, and it's all across the spectrum. They disbanded 500 police officers. They're calling in the highway patrol to go after fentanyl. They're asking for federal money. Right when they had the highest property crime rate per capita of any major city, they started defunding the police. They did a poll recently. 45% of San Franciscans that were polled said they've been the victim of theft or assault. And the DA, that Mr. Boudin, who was thrown out, admitted that only 2% of auto burglaries were ever prosecuted, or people were even arrested. So, gosh, any topic that you can think of that pertains to the integrity or the success of a city, they've ruined. They had one of the best high schools in the United States, Lowell High School, and they deliberately destroyed all meritocratic criteria for admissions, and almost immediately the grades fell and it imploded. It's almost as if you thought of how to ruin one of the great cities in the world, it would be very hard to match what they've done. They have 35% vacancy of commercial space. Just 5 years ago, I mean, you couldn't find a place for a store or a business, and now they can't give it away. Well, the subtext of this is that we forget the whole underpinning or foundation of the woke movement is that it doesn't require any knowledge or any skill. So once you go into a classroom and you take those precious zero-sum minutes out of the equation and you start to emote and talk about woke issues, now you're incompetent, you don't really know the basics of American history other than toxicity, then it's a pretty easy job to do, and people prefer to do that. So behind all of this push for indoctrination is really a teachers union message that we don't want to qualify teachers. We don't want to ask anything of them. We don't really care whether they know anything about history. History itself is a construct, and the result is we're creating a whole generation of historically ignorant, but at the same time arrogant people, because they're ideological and they have these talking points that we're racist or the country was marred or toxic at the founding, and it got worse. So arrogance and ignorance are a bad combination in a young person. Where you ask a young person about Margaret Sanger and Planned Parenthood, and they think she's a saint, not a eugenicist, which she was. So it's ignorance again. But this country is in a free-for-all. We don't have a margin of error. We're not the great United States that can experiment with all these crazy ideas. We're on the razor's edge on energy, the border, education, crime, and we're spiraling into third world status at a phenomenal rate. And it's all self-induced. That's what's so strange about it.
500,000 people have left California in the last 2 years, fleeing high costs of owning businesses, high taxes, leaving to other states such as Texas or Florida. Crime in the former states is off the charts, and people are choosing to leave their hometowns and go to red-governed states and flee their blue-governed state. In Spain, the country where most of the world's olive oil is made, farmers are complaining that the government isn't doing anything to help them. The prices that farmers are paid for the kilogram of olive is laughable, while the price of olive oil in the supermarkets has seen an increase never seen before. Olive oil is becoming almost a luxury food item in the country where it's actually made. They get paid 50 cents a kilogram, while in the supermarket it can reach 12 euros a litre. All the profits go into big retailers and never reaching the actual farmers. They are complaining that the government isn't doing anything about it, and they are being pushed to the edge, as farming is becoming an almost non-profit venture, drowned in high taxes, high cost of produce, and farming is almost a non-profitable when it comes to returns. In Germany, the green revolution of energy and the incessant pursuit of net zero policies have made energy and gas prices skyrocket, as in the UK and most of Europe. But who does all these policies really affect? It definitely isn't the people making them. The politicians sitting in their high moral chairs making these policies, which they're never affected by. We are living in the greatest wealth transfer in human history. They don't want you to own your car, God forbid it's a petrol car. They don't want you to own your house, and if you don't own one, it will be almost impossible due to the historic high price of housing for you to acquire one. They want to control how much energy you use, And with the disguise of saving the planet, they actually might be able to really control how much energy you have access to, for how long you're able to heat your house, how many times you can cook a day, or for how long you can shower or watch TV for. I don't understand how we haven't taken to the streets yet and revolted against those who wish to control our every move, what we eat and how we live. But know this, new lords and self-anointed kings, someday when enough of us wake up and realize what you're trying to do, your self-appointed rule will come to an end. Thank you very much for watching, and like always, see you in the next one.